Today I'm going to show you how to cast on with double pointed needles. The example I'm going to use for this, I'm going to cast on a hat. I'm going to cast on the jewel hat, and I will talk a little bit about what double pointed needles are used for. So they are normally sold in a pack of 4 or 5. If you are buying a pack of 5, it's usually because it's for something with quite a large circumference but not a jumper. So a hat is a great example. It could also be a baby jumper, another small accessory like some mittens as well, or a headband or a cowl. So double pointed needles are a way of knitting in the round where you can just continuously knit in a clockwise direction. And if you don't get on too well with using circulars or magic loop, you might want to try double pointed needles. A lot of people shy away from double pointed needles because they can have a tendency for the stitches to slip off the edge, but with a bit of practice and a bit of patience, taking your time and making sure that you secure the needles, anyone can learn to have a go at using double pointed needles. So we'll make a start. So as I said, I'm using the jewel hat as an example. I'm going to cast on a child size hat just to show you the small circumference. Now to cast on, you cast on just like you would with any other needle. If you don't feel confident casting on with the double pointed needle, you could always use a larger needle, just a 30 centimeter straight knitting needle. You could do that. Or if you want, you can cast on with the regular ones. So the task that I have is to cast on 98 stitches, okay? So I'm going to cast on over these 2 needles. Now doing it over 2 needles just enables you to see the stitches, and it's so that if you're a beginner, you're not casting on too tightly and you're not knitting too tightly as well. So it's a way of trying to control the tension here. So I'm just gonna start casting on. So I'm gonna find the loop. There we go. Okay, so I'm going to cast on the 98 stitches over the 2 needles. If you would prefer, you can always just use a 30 centimeter straight needle to cast on. That is fine. Okay, so I'm just casting on over 2 like so. Okay. Okay, so as you can see here, I have 98 stitches. Now obviously this is for the child size hat. If it was an adult hat, I might use the 30 centimeter needle to cast on because I've got more stitches and I need more length. This is only a 20 centimeter double pointed needle, but I'm doing a kid size, so I can show you this. But if you were doing it and you were doing the adult size, you will need more stitches, you'll need a longer needle. Just use a straight needle. Okay, so they come in a set of 5. Most knitters will use 3 or 4 needles at any one time, and there'll always be a needle that is free. So we're going to call this the active needle. The active needle will change each time you finish a set of stitches. So say that's needle 1, that will become the active needle after we've knit the next set of stitches. I'll show you as we go on. So you have your cast on stitches, okay? And all you have to do is take one of the needles, and so if this is for the jewel hat, we're just going to do knit 1, purl 1. So I have 98 stitches, so I'm going to split it roughly across 3 needles this time. So say I'm going to put about 32, 33 stitches on each needle. Okay, so that's how I'm going to do it. So when you are working with DPNs, unless the pattern specifically tells you how many stitches to put on each needle, just roughly split it 3 or 4 ways. So if you had 100 stitches, you might want to use 4 needles and have 25 on each. but I'm using 3 needles and I've got 98 stitches, okay? So knit, purl, knit. So I'll split those across and just be, be really patient, take your time. What I would always advise for beginners, in particular when they're using DPNs, is do it on a desktop. So like I'm doing here, so I'm doing it on a desk. And that just means that my needles won't go completely vertical and slide out of the stitches. It's a way of me keeping the needle under control whilst also learning how to use the needle. I'll just move that hat out of the way so it doesn't get stuck. So I'm just doing knit 1, purl 1, rib, and as you can see, I'm taking my time. I'm not rushing because I don't want to drop the needle. My tension, because I'm not a beginner, my tension is fine. I'm not really worried about the needle slipping out of the stitches here because it's not loose. So I'm just gonna keep going. Okay, and I'll do needle 1, and then I'll speed up till we get to the end. So this is all I'm doing. I'm just doing knit 1, purl 1. Obviously, if this was a sleeve that you're working on, you would just be knitting across the stitches. I'm just using the example for the jewel hat as mine. But yeah, we just go across like so. Okay, and keep going. So yeah, I'm going to do about 32 stitches. Wow, 33 on 2 needles, 32 on the other. Okay, and just keep going. Now, when it's time to knit across the next set of stitches, just untangle that. Okay, when it's time to knit across, so something else I do as well is, it's not integral, but obviously if it's an even number, I will end the needle on a purl, and then I know it's always a knit on the next one. But that doesn't matter if you've got an odd number of stitches. So I'm just going to pop that one down there, okay, and then I'm going to pick up the second needle and I'm going to knit across about 30 stitches there. So you'll have a bit of yarn between those needles. Don't worry about that. We're working with the active yarn, so the yarn that comes from the ball. I'm just going to wrap it over there, just knit it as I normally would, and keep going. So I'm just going to keep knitting and adding another needle each time, okay? So you do that until you get to your last third or last quarter. As you can see, I'm still using the 2 needles because that just helps me manage the tension of those stitches, okay? So keep going. So I've actually changed my mind. I'm going to do it across 4 needles because it's quite a lot of stitches. So all we have to do to release the active needle, so obviously I've knit across the others. I'm just going to gently pull it out and then knit across that last needle. So be careful not to grab that bit of yarn that joins one needle to the other. Grab the working yarn that is in the ball of yarn. Okay, do not be tempted to grab that tail there, okay, because you need that to knit. Okay, and you'll get very tangled if you start trying to knit with that and not the working yarn. Okay, so just knit across that last needle. Okay, it's a bit messy at this stage, but just be patient. Okay, we got there in the end. So just to recap on where we are, I've cast on and I've knit across 4 working needles and I have a spare active needle. Okay, so this is where I've just finished. Okay, now as you can see, this is not yet joined in the round. So this is why I advise you use a tabletop or a cushion, because you want to just turn your needles so that all the stitches are facing in the right direction. Okay, so again, just be gentle. What I'm going to do here, I've got quite a long tail, so I'm just going to tie it together so I know not to knit with it. Okay, so so let's say it's like this. Okay, and I need to join it to work in the round. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to turn it over. Okay, so take the needles and move just gently. Just keep an eye on your stitches, because nobody means to twist their stitches. Okay, there we go. So I've moved that needle that had the working yarn, I've moved it back over to my right hand from the left, just by flipping over the needles. Okay, and now what I do is, so the working yarn is here behind this right hand needle. I'm going to take my active needle and I'm going to put it through that first stitch. Now obviously you've flipped it over and you cast on here, so it might be a little bit tight. I'm going to take the working yarn. Okay, now the trap that a lot of knitters fall into is they start trying to knit with this needle, because that's the way you would do if you were using circulars or straight needles, and you don't knit with that one, otherwise you'll end up with all the stitches on that needle and then you won't be doing it properly. So just grab the working yarn and go through that first stitch, knit it, okay, and then keep knitting and purling. Okay, so I'm just doing the rib stitch for the jewel hat. Now as you can see, my tension's all right, so nothing is slipping out of the needles, but you will just want to keep an eye on it and just make sure that there's still a bit of needle there. They're not right at the edge, do you know what I mean? So I'm just going to keep working now across, and once I've knit all the stitches on this needle, this will become the active needle, and so on. Okay, so you just keep going across, and this is why I said use a tabletop, because it will help you get a grip on how this works. Okay, so keep going, knit and purl across those stitches. It's more like a square, isn't it, than knitting in the round. Keep going. Okay, so as you can see, I've got to the end of that first set of stitches. I'm just going to purl, and then that frees up the next active needle, and that's all we do. We just keep working in a clockwise direction. Don't forget to use the active needle each time. Okay, and that is how you knit with double pointed needles.